In a city where money buys distance, Calder Voss learned the cruelest lesson of all: dignity isn't about what you do, it's about what others decide you're worth. Tonight, outside a venue where a single event raised more than his yearly salary, he would discover that Humiliation has an audience, and tonight, it's watching. But across a crowded entrance, a woman who built empires would see what no one else had bothered to notice: the man who'd been keeping her world immaculate all along. The blind date had cost Calder Voss 3 weeks of brutal calculation. 3 weeks of taking double shifts when his knees already ached from the concrete floors. 3 weeks of skipping the corner deli, convincing himself the hollow feeling wasn't hunger, just nerves, just the price of hoping someone might see him as more than the uniform he wore. The reservation wasn't expensive, not by any reasonable standard, but he'd researched it obsessively during his lunch breaks, hunched over his phone in the supply closet. The Westside Provisions food truck had been featured in a lifestyle magazine someone had left in the executive lounge. It served gourmet fusion on artisan plates, the kind of place that pretended to be casual while charging prices that made Calder's stomach tighten. But it was close to the gala venue, and Maribel had said she wanted something trendy, something Instagram-worthy, somewhere that proved he was paying attention to what mattered. It was the location that had captured him first. Not tucked away in shame on some forgotten corner, but proudly stationed across from the city's most prestigious event space, the Cathedral of Glass and Commerce, where Calder spent his nights making other people's success look effortless. It was close enough to his world to feel manageable, far enough from the janitorial entrance to feel like escape. This was a date that whispered ambition rather than shouted desperation, and that felt safer somehow. He'd finally committed on a Tuesday, using money he'd been saving for his mother's prescription refill, telling himself this was an investment. Maribel had been talking about meeting in person for weeks now, her messages full of winky faces and suggestions that maybe she'd been wrong to judge him by his job, that maybe what mattered was effort, was attention, was proof that he could offer her something better than her ex had provided. Now, standing beneath the harsh streetlights outside the gala entrance, Calder felt the choice differently. The pressed shirt that had seemed sharp in his apartment's bathroom mirror now felt stiff, obvious, the kind of garment that announced its discount store origins under scrutiny. Across the street, the food truck glowed with warm Edison bulbs and the confident chatter of people who never had to calculate the exact cost of optimism. His phone buzzed. Finally. OMG, stuck in traffic, babe. Go ahead and order for us. Something good though, not like basic tacos LOL. Calder read the message 4 times, searching for affection in the abbreviated casualness, finding only his own desperate need to believe. He'd been waiting for 40 minutes already, watching couples emerge from expensive rideshares, watching the kind of easy intimacy that comes from never doubting your place in someone else's priority list. The evening air carried that particular chill that settles over cities when the sun abandons them. The kind that cuts through thin fabric and cheaper optimism, reminding you exactly how exposed you really are. He crossed the street toward the food truck, each step feeling like a small betrayal of the caution that usually kept him safe. Behind him, the gala's entrance blazed with arrival after arrival. Beautiful people in clothes that cost more than his car, their laughter casual and bright, the sound of those who'd never had to wonder if they deserved to take up space. In the glow of the truck's menu board, Calder studied the prices with the focused intensity of someone doing triage. $23 for 2 entrees. Acceptable. Painful, but acceptable. He ordered, paid with cash he'd been carrying in his front pocket for fear of his card declining, and stood waiting with the small numbered placard they'd given him. That's when he saw her. Not Maribel, whose profile picture had promised glossy confidence and the possibility of someone seeing past his job title. But his boss. Elowen Carradine stood 15 feet away at the gala entrance, framed by light and architecture and the invisible force field of wealth that makes certain people seem untouchable. She wore gray the way other people wore armor, her posture containing the kind of stillness that comes from being watched constantly, from knowing any crack in composure will be catalogued and weaponized. Her hair was pulled back in that severe style he recognized from the quarterly all-staff meetings, when she'd address them from behind a podium like a general addressing troops she'd never fought beside. He'd seen her exactly twice in the 18 months he'd worked in her building. Both times from a distance that felt appropriate, necessary, the kind of separation that protected them both from the awkwardness of acknowledging how fundamentally different their worlds were. Now she was looking directly at him. Not through him, the way most people did. At him. Calder's face flushed hot. He turned away quickly, pretending intense interest in the food truck's health rating. Calder? The voice was feminine but unfamiliar, sharper than Maribel's breathy effect in their text exchanges. He turned. She was beautiful in the way that specific kind of cruelty often is, perfectly constructed, her makeup highlighting rather than hiding, her outfit screaming both money and studied carelessness. But her expression carried something that made Calder's optimism begin its slow, terrible collapse. Disappointment. Not surprising. Not nervousness. Just that flat, evaluating disappointment. You're Calder. It wasn't a question. Maribel's eyes tracked from his face to his shirt to the food truck behind him, and something in her expression shifted from disappointment to something harder. This is the surprise you've been hyping? A food truck? Behind her, Calder noticed for the first time that a phone was angled directly at them. A ring light is attached. Recording. His stomach dropped through the pavement. Earlier that evening, Elowen Carradine had stood at the edge of her own gala, champagne untouched in her hand, watching wealth perform its familiar theater. Crystal chandeliers cast calculated light across faces she recognized but didn't know. Conversations hummed with the particular frequency of people networking rather than connecting, each laugh calibrated for maximum return on investment. She'd built this. The company, the influence, the carefully curated distance that kept everyone at arm's length. It had cost her everything except money, which turned out to be the only thing that didn't matter. Through the glass facade, she caught her reflection superimposed over the crowd. Gray suit. Severe hair. The armor she wore so convincingly that even she sometimes forgot there was supposed to be a person underneath. Behind her, deeper in the building, was her office where her sun-riven school photo sat in a frame she rarely looked at anymore. 8 years old, and already he watched her with the same polite detachment these donors did. She tried that morning. Really tried. What do you want for breakfast? She'd asked, and he'd looked up from his tablet with those careful eyes and said, whatever's easiest. 8 years old, and already trained not to need her. The gala noise pressed against her skull. She stepped toward the entrance, seeking air, seeking anything that felt less performative than the carefully orchestrated generosity happening behind her. That's when she saw him across the street. Not a donor. Not a board member. Just a man in a pressed shirt that tried too hard, checking his phone with the anxious frequency of someone waiting for rescue that might not come. Calder Voss. She knew his name from the building directory, from the quarterly reports where his employee number appeared in the facilities column. She'd never spoken to him, but she'd seen him, really seen him, once. 3 a.m. on a deadline night when she'd emerged from her office to find the executive floor gleaming, and him kneeling by the baseboards with a toothbrush, cleaning grout no one else would ever notice. That kind of invisible care. That dedication to work no one acknowledged. She understood it in a way that made her chest ache. Now he was checking his phone again, and even from this distance, Elowen could read the hope dying in his posture, degree by painful degree. She watched him cross the street toward the food truck, watched him pay with cash counted out carefully, watched him stand there holding a numbered placard like it was proof of something. Then she saw the woman approach. Watched the body language shift from greeting to assessment to something colder. Watched Calder's shoulders curve inward in that universal posture of bracing for impact. And she realized she was about to witness something she'd felt her entire life but never had the courage to name, the moment when someone decides you're not worth their time. Wait, let me get the angle right. Maribel adjusted her phone, stepping back so the food truck's menu board filled the frame behind Calder's frozen face. Okay, so guys, we're doing the thing. Remember I told you about poverty tourism? This is it. This is what happens when you don't vet your dates. Calder's throat closed. Around them, people were starting to notice. The food truck vendor looked uncomfortable. A couple walking past slowed, phones already emerging. Maribel, I thought you wanted something casual, you said trendy. Trendy. She laughed, and it sounded rehearsed, performed for her audience. Babe, trendy is ironic. This is just sad. You spent your whole week's salary on $20 tacos, didn't you? Oh my God, you actually thought, she pressed her free hand to her chest in mock sympathy. You thought this was enough. That you were enough. The words landed like physical blows. Calder felt his vision narrow, the kind of tunnel vision that comes right before you pass out or break down, whichever mercy finds you first. The saddest part? Maribel continued, panning her camera from his face to his shirt to his worn shoes. He actually tried. Look at him. He actually believed someone like me would see something in someone like him. That's the content, guys. That's the delusion. This is what happens when working-class guys forget their place. From across the street, Elowen felt something crack open inside her chest. Not pity. Rage. The kind of rage that comes from recognizing your own pain in someone else's humiliation. She was moving before she'd made the conscious decision to intervene. Maribel was still performing, still narrating Calder's destruction for whatever audience was watching live. Remember, know your worth. Don't let broke guys waste your time with their little fantasies. Like, imagine thinking a food truck is romance. Excuse me. The voice cut through the performance with the particular authority of someone used to rooms going silent when they speak. Maribel stopped mid-sentence, phone still raised, and turned. Elowen Carradine stood 3 feet away, her gray suit somehow making everyone else look costumed. She wasn't looking at Calder. She was looking at Maribel with the focused intensity of someone cataloging exactly how to dismantle a threat. I'm going to need you to delete that footage. If you've ever felt this kind of exposed, this kind of small, you're not alone in this story. Stay with me, because sometimes the people who truly see us are standing closer than we think. Maribel's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. Excuse me. This is a public space, I can film whatever. You can. But you filmed an employee of Carradine Technologies without consent, on property adjacent to our private event, and you broadcast identifiable harassment. Elowen pulled out her phone with the casual threat of unlimited resources. Our legal team is very efficient. We can do this civilly, or we can do this through litigation that will cost you considerably more than whatever engagement you're hoping to gain. The change in Maribel's face was immediate. The performed confidence evaporated into something younger, more uncertain. I didn't know he worked for you. That shouldn't matter. But since it apparently does, yes. Delete it. Now. 30 seconds of excruciating silence while Maribel tapped at her screen, each deletion announced with a soft chime. Then she was walking away quickly, her performance abandoned, just another person trying to escape consequences. The gathered crowd dispersed with the disappointed energy of people denied a spectacle. The food truck vendor quietly set Calder's order on the counter, eyes averted in second-hand shame. Calder couldn't move. Couldn't speak. His numbered placard sat next to the food, suddenly the most pathetic prop imaginable. Elowen turned to him properly for the first time. Not the way she looked at problems to solve or assets to leverage. Like he was a person whose night had just been destroyed and who deserved more than efficient crisis management. Are you alright? The question was so gentle, so unexpectedly human, that Calder felt something crack in his carefully maintained composure. His voice broke. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. She said it simply, like it was obvious. Then, softer, have you eaten? What? It's a simple question. Have you eaten dinner? I was about to, but not here. She glanced at the food truck, then back at the gala where the party continued its oblivious celebration. There's a restaurant 2 blocks away. Quiet. They know me. Let me buy you an actual meal. She paused, and something vulnerable flickered across her composed features. Not because you work for me. Not out of pity. But because what just happened was unconscionable, and you deserve to end tonight with your dignity intact. Calder looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he hadn't expected. Loneliness. The same bone-deep isolation he carried, just dressed in expensive fabric. Okay, he said quietly. Yes. The restaurant was the kind of quiet that money buys. Soft lighting, tables spaced for privacy, staff who moved like they'd trained in silence and discretion. Calder felt his shirt announce itself against the leather booth, but Elowen didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she just didn't care. They ordered. The waiter departed. And in the space that followed, Calder felt the weight of what he needed to say. I know who you are, he said finally, because the pretense was suffocating. You're Elowen Carradine. You own the building where I work. You probably know my employee number. I do. She hadn't touched her water. Calder Voss. Facilities. Night shift. 18 months. Your performance reviews are excellent. You're also the reason the executive floor always looks immaculate. I noticed the baseboards once. 3 in the morning. You were using a toothbrush on the grout. The specificity shocked him. You remember that? I remember thinking that someone who cares that much about work no one will ever notice is exactly the kind of person who deserves to be noticed. She was quiet for a long moment, the kind of silence that precedes admissions you can't take back. Then, I have a son. His name is Riven. He's 8 years old. The shift in topic felt deliberate, vulnerable. Calder waited. This morning I asked him what he wanted for breakfast, and he said, whatever's easiest. Elowen's voice stayed level but something broke beneath it. 8 years old, and he's already trained not to need me. He looks at me the way people look at museum exhibits. Interesting. Important. Untouchable. She met his eyes, and the naked pain there hit Calder harder than Maribel's cruelty had. Earlier tonight, I was standing in a room full of people celebrating a company I built, and I felt completely alone. Then I looked out the window and saw you waiting. Hoping. Actually caring about another person's opinion enough to risk everything. Her hand moved closer to his on the table. And I thought, that's what I've lost. The ability to hope someone will see me. The courage to need something I can't control. Calder felt his throat tighten. Why are you telling me this? Because watching you get destroyed tonight made me feel something I haven't felt in years. Not strategic anger. Not calculated outrage. Just human rage at cruelty. And I realized, she stopped, then pushed forward. I realized I want to remember what it feels like to be human. And you, standing there with your $23 investment in optimism, you're more human than anyone in that gala. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither had known they needed. The food arrived but neither of them touched it immediately. Outside, the city continued its cold, glittering indifference. Inside, 2 people from opposite sides of every divide were finding unexpected common ground. Tell me about your mother, Elowen said, and it wasn't polite inquiry. It was genuine need to understand. Calder smiled for the first time that night. She has lupus. The medical bills are why I work nights, why I took the date seriously. I thought maybe if someone could see past the uniform. He stopped, the evening's humiliation still raw. She's stubborn. Refuses to let the disease define her. On good days, she still tries to cook for me like I'm 10 years old. And on bad days? On bad days she apologizes for being a burden, and I have to remind her that taking care of her is the most important thing I'll ever do. His voice strengthened. It's not obligation. It's purpose. She gave me life. I'm just returning the investment. Purpose. Elowen repeated the word like it was foreign. I built Carradine Technologies on purpose. Disruption, innovation, market domination. I told myself the long hours, the sacrifices, they all served this greater vision. She turned her water glass slowly. But Riven doesn't care about quarterly earnings. He just wants a mother who's present. Who sees him. And I don't know how to be that person anymore. You're here, Calder said simply. Right now. You saw someone hurting and you stepped in. That wasn't a corporate strategy, that was human decency. I've spent so long optimizing for profit that I forgot to optimize for meaning. She looked at him with sudden intensity. Your mother is lucky. Someone loves her enough to sacrifice everything. Riven has everything material, but he doesn't have what he actually needs, genuine connection. It's not too late. Calder's hand moved closer to hers on the table. He's 8. He still wants you. You just have to want to be wanted. You have to choose being imperfect and present over being perfect and distant. The words settled between them like an equation finally balanced. Two people from opposite worlds, finding that loneliness speaks the same language regardless of net worth. I don't know what this is, Elowen admitted. I don't do uncertainty well. Neither do I. Calder's smile was small but real. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the only way out of loneliness is being brave enough to risk more of it. Their hands were touching now, barely, the kind of contact that announces intention without demanding commitment. Outside, the city's lights blurred through the restaurant windows. Inside, something tentative and fragile and entirely human was taking root. The board meeting happened over the next week. Elowen had seen Calder 3 more times, coffee twice, one long evening walk through the financial district after his shift ended. Nothing inappropriate. Everything terrifying in its simplicity. She was midway through Q4 projections when Marcus Holloway cleared his throat with the particular aggression of a man about to make a point. Before we continue, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. He slid his tablet across the table. The screen showed a grainy photo, Elowen and Calder at the restaurant, heads close, the intimacy unmistakable. Elowen's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened on her pen. And you're dating the janitor. Holloway said it like an accusation, like a diagnosis. Our investors are already asking questions. The press is circling. This isn't just poor judgment, Elowen, it's a brand integrity crisis. My personal life is not a brand crisis. Everything you do affects this company. Patricia Chen leaned forward, her voice carrying rehearsed concern. You've built Carradine Tech on excellence, on aspiration. What message does it send when the CEO is, she paused delicately, involved with facilities staff? It suggests poor boundaries. Questionable judgment. The words hung in the air like poison. Elowen felt the old instinct rise, retreat behind walls, prove she didn't need anyone, sacrifice connection to maintain control. But then she thought about Calder's mother. About purpose beyond profit. About Riven's careful, distant eyes and the way they'd finally brightened last night when she'd come home early and asked about his day. Really asked. Really listened. The message, she said with surgical precision, is that people have value beyond their economic utility. That care and dedication matter regardless of job title. That maybe, just maybe, I've spent so long optimizing for shareholder return that I forgot about human return. That's lovely philosophy. Holloway's tone dripped condescension. But philosophy doesn't protect stock prices when the CEO's judgment is questioned publicly. My judgment built this company. My judgment keeps it profitable. And my judgment says Calder Voss has more integrity than most of the executives in this room. The silence that followed carried threat. Patricia Chen looked at the others, an unspoken conversation happening in exchanged glances. We're not asking, Elowen. We're strongly recommending you end this relationship before it damages everything you've worked for. Elowen stood, gathering her materials with deliberate calm. Noted. Now if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. But as she left the boardroom, she felt the walls closing in. They wouldn't let this go. They couldn't afford to let her be human. And the worst part? A small, terrified part of her understood why. The envelope arrived by courier 3 days later. Heavy stock paper, corporate letterhead, the kind of official communication that ruins lives in measured, legal language. Elowen read it twice, feeling each word like a physical blow. Formal notice of no confidence review. The board of directors hereby initiates proceedings to evaluate leadership fitness based on recent behavioral concerns and reputational risk factors. They were going to force her out. Her company. Her creation. Because she dared to be human. She was still holding the letter when her office door opened. Calder stood in the entrance, mop and cleaning cart conspicuously absent. He'd clearly been waiting for the executive floor to empty. I heard, he said quietly. Building gossip moves fast. They're coming after you because of me. They're coming after me because they're cowards threatened by anything that doesn't fit their narrow definition of appropriate. But her voice lacked conviction. The letter felt heavy in her hand, heavy with consequences she couldn't control. I should go. Calder said it fast, like ripping off a bandage. I should quit, disappear, whatever makes this easier for you. You have a son who needs you. A company you built. A legacy that matters. His voice broke slightly. What do I have? A sick mother and a job that apparently makes me too inappropriate to exist in your world. Don't. The word came out sharper than intended. Don't reduce yourself to a problem to be solved. You're not the issue here. But I am, though. He pulled out his phone, showed her the screenshots he'd captured from news sites. Tech CEO's charity case romance. Billionaire's downward spiral. Carradine's crisis, when empathy becomes liability. The headlines competed for cruelest framing. I won't be the reason you lose everything. I care about you too much for that. The admission hit Elowen like a physical force. He cared. Despite everything. Despite the risk. Despite knowing exactly how this story was supposed to end. Calder. I called my supervisor. I'm putting in notice. He was backing toward the door, and she could see it taking everything he had to maintain composure. Maybe in a few months, when things calm down, when your board forgets, maybe then we could. No. Elowen stood, the letter falling from her hands. No, you don't get to make that choice for me. You don't get to decide what I can afford to lose. You'd lose everything. I'd lose a company. You are not a company. Riven is not a company. The life I'm finally learning to live, that's not a company. She crossed to him, close enough that he couldn't retreat without it being an obvious flight. For the first time in 8 years, my son looked at me last night and smiled. Really smiled. Because I was present. Because I was trying. You gave me that. They're going to destroy you. Then let them try. Her voice carried something new, something fierce. I'm so tired of playing by rules that make me smaller. I'm so tired of proving I deserve a seat at a table that values profit over people. What are you saying? I'm saying, Elowen felt something unlock inside her chest, something that had been clenched tight for years. I'm saying that maybe it's time to build a different table. The emergency board meeting was called for the following morning. Every member present, several in person when they normally phoned in, the scent of blood in the water drawing them close. Holloway started the proceedings with barely concealed satisfaction. Ms. Carradine, we've convened to discuss. I know why we're here. Elowen stood at the head of the table she'd sat at for 7 years, commanding the room one last time. You want me to apologize? To end my relationship? To prove I value your comfort over my humanity? She paused, letting the silence build. I won't. The table stirred with uncomfortable shifting. But I will offer you something better. A fundamental restructuring of Carradine Technologies into a workers' equity and trust model. Every employee, from facilities to executive, becomes a stakeholder. Profit sharing. Democratic board representation. A company built on the principle that people create value, not just extract it. That's insane. Patricia Chen's face had gone pale. You'd give up control. I'd give up dictatorship. I'd keep leadership. There's a difference. Elowen felt the words pouring out with the force of years of unspoken conviction. I built this company on the belief that I had to control everything to protect it. But control without connection is just another kind of poverty. I've been rich and alone. I'm done with that. The shareholders will never. I am the majority shareholder. I have the power to make this change. And I will. She looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes. You can fight me. You can try to force me out. But I'll take this company into a new model with or without your approval. The lawsuits will come. The media circus will be brutal. But for the first time in years, I'll be fighting for something worth the cost. Holloway stood, fury barely contained. This is career suicide. No. This is finally living up to the values I claim to have. This is proving to my son that integrity matters. This is showing him that the people who care for us, who keep our floors clean, who make our world function, they deserve equity, not charity. She thought of Calder, of the way he'd walked away to protect her. And this is fighting for the people worth fighting for, even when the cost is everything I thought defined me. The room erupted in argument, but Elowen barely heard it. She'd made her choice. Now she just had to find the man who'd inspired it and prove that his worth wasn't measured by the board's narrow definitions. She left the room mid-argument, her phone already out, dialing the number she'd memorized 3 days ago. Calder was packing his mother's medication when the knock came. He'd already submitted his resignation. Already started looking at overnight warehouse positions where no one would care about his romantic choices or his class status. His mother's voice came from the bedroom, weakened by the latest flare but still sharp. If that's her and you don't let her in, I'm disowning you. He opened the door. Elowen stood in the apartment hallway, still in her board meeting suit, looking gloriously out of place among the peeling paint and flickering fluorescent lights. You restructured the entire company. Calder had seen the news, the shocked headlines. You gave up control. I gave up dictatorship. Not leadership. There's a difference. She stepped inside, uninvited but not unwelcome. And I didn't do it for you. I did it because of you. Because you reminded me that purpose matters more than power. That taking care of people isn't weakness, it's the entire point. The board can accept it or leave. Half of them walked out. The other half are too curious about the model to quit. She moved closer, and he could see the exhilaration in her eyes, the wildness of someone who'd finally stopped performing. I called Riven from the car. Really talked to him. Told him I was scared I'd lost him, that I was trying to change, that I needed his help to remember how to be his mother. He cried. I cried. We're starting therapy together next week. Calder felt his throat tighten. That's good. That's really good. I need to know something. Elowen's voice softened. When you said you were leaving to protect me, did you mean it? Or were you running because you believed what they said about you not being enough? The question hit center mass. Calder looked away, then forced himself to meet her eyes. Both. I meant it and I believed it. I've spent my whole life being told my value is in what I do, not who I am. He gestured at the small apartment, the evidence of his economic reality. You restructured a billion-dollar company. I can't even afford my mother's medication without working double shifts. How is that a partnership? How is that not just you rescuing me? Because I need rescuing too. She took his hands, and her grip was solid, real, the touch of someone choosing connection over safety. I was drowning in control, in isolation, in the belief that needing someone made me weak. You didn't save me with some grand gesture. You saved me by showing me what it looks like to care about something beyond profit. To measure worth in dedication instead of dollars. I'm still a janitor. For now. The new worker equity model includes vocational training, education benefits, and pathways to leadership for anyone who wants them. You could run facilities management. You could go back to school. You could keep cleaning floors if that's what fulfills you. Her voice strengthened. The point is choice. The point is that your worth isn't defined by your job title, it's defined by the integrity you bring to everything you do. From the bedroom, his mother's voice called out. If you don't say yes, I'm disowning you. I didn't raise a coward. Calder laughed, and it came out wet with unshed tears. You restructured an entire corporation so we could date. I restructured an entire corporation because it was right. Because I was tired of being rich and lonely. Because I wanted my son to see his mother fight for something beyond profit margins. She smiled, unguarded and real. Dating you is just the extraordinary side benefit. What if I'm not ready? What if I need time to figure out who I am without the shame? Without feeling like someone's project? Then I'll wait. I'll be here. Making mistakes with Riven. Building something new. Learning how to be human instead of efficient. She squeezed his hands. But I need you to know, you are not my project. You're the person who reminded me what I'd forgotten. That's partnership, not charity. Calder looked at her, brilliant, terrifying, vulnerable Elowen who'd fought an entire system for the right to be human. Yes, he said quietly. Let's build something impossible. But slowly. Let me catch up to you first. Deal. She smiled. We've got time. For the first time in years, I've got all the time in the world. The Carradine Technologies quarterly all-staff meeting looked different now. The podium was gone. Elowen stood at floor level, and around her sat employees who were now stakeholders, partners in the company's evolution rather than expendable resources. Calder stood near the back, no longer in uniform but in business casual, halfway through the management training program he'd enrolled in. His mother sat in the second row, oxygen tank beside her but eyes bright, finally able to afford the treatment that was giving her good days outnumbering the bad. Elowen caught his eye across the room and smiled. Not the performative smile of corporate theater, but something genuine and unguarded. Before we cover quarterly results, she said to the assembled employees, I want to talk about what we've learned in 6 months. We've learned that democratizing ownership doesn't destroy innovation, it fuels it. We've learned that when people have a stake in success, they invest differently. And we've learned, she paused, looking at Calder, that the people who keep our world running deserve equity, not invisibility. The room erupted in applause, not polite, but genuine. The kind that comes from people who feel seen. After the meeting, Calder found Elowen in the newly renovated break room, watching Riven play chess with Maria from facilities. The boy was laughing, really laughing, the sound of a child who'd learned his mother's presence wasn't something to fear losing. "You did it," Calder said quietly, sliding beside her. "We did it." She leaned into him, comfortable now with the contact, with being witnessed. "The quarterly numbers are up. Employee satisfaction is the highest it's ever been. Turnover is down 60%. She paused. "But more importantly, I came home for dinner 4 nights this week. Riven asked me to help with his science project instead of his nanny. That's the real metric. That's the only metric that matters." She turned to face him fully. "I'm enrolling in that executive coaching program. The one about leading with vulnerability. And I'm cutting my hours to 40 a week." Calder's eyebrows rose. Elowen Carradine, working 40 hours. Elowen Carradine, living a life worth working for. She smiled. "Your mother asked me to Sunday dinner next week. Said she wants to teach Riven to make pastels. And you said yes." "I said yes to everything. To uncertainty. To need people. To build something that can't be measured in stock prices." She took his hand, their fingers interlacing with practiced ease. "To you." Across the room, Riven looked up and waved. Not seeking permission, not checking if she'd disappear, just sharing a moment of joy with the mother who'd finally learned to stay. "I love you," Elowen said, and the words came easy now, stripped of performance, carrying only truth. "Not for saving me, not for inspiring change. Just for being you." Stubborn, principled, impossibly good Calder Voss who saw me when I'd forgotten how to see myself. "I love you too," he said. "Even though you still burn toast and cry at board meetings. Especially because of that." They stood together, watching Riven checkmate Maria with theatrical flair, surrounded by the architecture they'd built together, not of glass and steel, but of dignity, equity, and the radical notion that everyone deserves to be seen. Outside, the city hummed with its usual indifference. But inside Carradine Technologies, something impossible had taken root and grown, a company that measured success in human terms, led by a woman who'd learned that the only wealth worth having is the kind you can share. And for the first time in longer than either could remember, neither of them felt alone. If Calder's story reminded you that your worth isn't measured by your job title, if Elowen's journey showed you it's never too late to choose connection over control, if any part of this resonated with the times you felt invisible, undervalued, or alone, you're not alone in feeling that way. This story was written for everyone who's ever been made to feel less than, because of what they do instead of who they are. Speech balloon. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had a Maribel moment where someone made you feel small? Or an Elowen moment where you chose to step in for someone being treated unfairly? Share your story. This is a judgment-free space, and your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Red heart. If this story touched you, hit that like button and let me know which moment hit hardest. Was it the food truck humiliation, the boardroom confrontation, or the quiet moment when Riven finally laughed with his mother? Bell. Subscribe for more stories that remind us we're human first, everything else second. Stories about dignity, worth, and the courage it takes to be vulnerable in a world that rewards armor. Mobile phone. Share this with someone who needs to remember their worth today. Tag them. Send them the link. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we're enough, exactly as we are. Your story matters. Your worth isn't negotiable. And somewhere, someone is waiting to see you the way Elowen finally saw Calder, fully, truly, and without conditions. What's your takeaway from Calder and Elowen's journey? I'm reading every comment. Blue heart.